Ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, please allow me one recollection. One time in the middle of the 70s, when I was the editor-in-chief of Revue Photographique, a three-language magazine, I was delegated by the Czechoslovak Union of Journalists to attend a conference in Morocco. They bought me an air ticket, I prepared my speech, and then suddenly, 3 days before my departure, I was called by the union chairman who said, "Daniela, I am shocked. I just had a call from our Moroccan partner saying that they had no idea we were sending a woman. And they felt that bringing a woman over was not quite appropriate. And so there was no Czechoslovak delegate at the conference in Morocco. However, I must admit that so far it's been my only negative experience as a woman. On the contrary, most of the time, the fact that I am a woman has been helpful to me, both in my life and in my profession. But let's talk about the topic of women in photography in the former communist bloc. I must admit that having accepted the invitation to this conference, I got a bit scared. Are they expecting a fiery call to arms in the name of some feminist movement in contemporary photography? Am I going to provoke them with my lukewarm attitude to the so-called feminist issue? Let me say straight and upfront. It is my belief that feminism is a woman's right, just as it is a man's right to be themselves. But all of us have to fight out this right, whether we are women or men, whether we are photographers or members of whatever other profession. I am Czech. I was born in former Czechoslovakia, where I spent the larger part of my life living under the so-called totalitarian communist regime. It may sound paradoxical, but I have to say that the communist regime, with its work obligation for all citizens, opened the door for women to enter absolutely all professions, even those which, in my opinion, are not suitable for women. For example, tractor drivers, road asphalters, or coal miners. And so women quite naturally became photographers, photo reporters, photo artists, company or studio portrait photographers. The strong photographic tradition in Czechoslovakia also influenced the involvement of women in the amateur movement, which in those days was generously supported by the state. And naturally, they were involved in the education section, as well as artists' associations. In the beginning of the 70s, there even existed a very popular photographic exhibition called Women with Cameras, that only exhibited women photographers and was repeated every year. So, the issue at the time wasn't the need to advocate for women in photography or the need to fight for female equality in the business. The issue was to assert one's point of view under the prevailing political conditions. And because I started my talk by telling you my personal experience with Morocco, let me also reveal my personal credo, the credo I have lived by my whole life. Its validity is affirmed by my life experience. It goes, When you really want something, you will get it. You will find a way, but you mustn't be afraid. I am not a photographer. I am a woman involved in photography, and I believe that I have so far reached all my goals as editor, as writer, as curator, as filmmaker. I'll say immodestly that the magazine Revue Fotografie, where I worked for 16 years, became a magazine of world renown under my editorship. I conceived it as a bridge between the East and the West. It was published in Czech, Russian, and English. Its Russian version was perceived by readers in the former Soviet Union republics as a window to the world. And for many photographers from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and of course Russia, Georgia, Ukraine, and other countries, it was their first international publishing platform. It sounds almost unbelievable, but last month I was invited to southern Ural, to Chelyabinsk, where at their photo festival they had an exhibition dedicated to my magazine, Revue Fotografie. Imagine that more than 40 years later, they celebrate a magazine which, in their own words, formed the photographic opinion in the countries of the former USSR. I confess it was very, very touching. So it was Revue Fotografie magazine, published in Russian too. It was monthly magazine I also edited. Okay. And I will say also immodestly that also later books on photography written either by myself or with my husband Vladimir had many international editions. And also exhibitions curated by myself or together with my husband toured all over the world. And when I edited another magazine, monthly, Fotografie, I was very soon surrounded by 20,000 people who established a magazine club. And when I was working for the Czechoslovak television, I succeeded in making and presenting films on photography and photographers. And based on my experience as a member of international photographic juries, I founded and for 20 years directed Czech Press Photo Contest. Of course, it was not all easy, not at all. I won't tell you how many times I had to explain and defend the material I published to the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia. For example, I had to explain why the cover of the issue dedicated to the grand Czech photographer Josef Sudek had a black frame when the Communist Party Congress was taking place at the same time as the magazine was published. It was funny and sad at the same time, and also dangerous. I had to bring Sudek's pictures to the communist bosses, and I had to show them that Joseph Sudek's photographs had only black frames. I won't be telling you how my suitcase full of photographs for the special Soviet issue of Revue had to be transported from my hotel in Moscow to Moscow airport and taken through customs by Leonid Brezhnev's personal photographer, Volodya Muselyan. Why? Because some photographers from Moscow had heard that customs officers wouldn't let the photographs through. but Volodya helped me with the suitcase full of photographs directed to the plane going to Prague. And I won't even tell you how I, at Prague airport for a change, had to encourage John Hull, the vice director of the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford, with shots of vodka, when he carried on a tourist visa photographs from Prague to London for the early Soviet photographers exhibition in Oxford. And I am not all going to talk about how, against a strict ban, I was in touch with foreign embassies in Prague in order to put together more than 1,200 original photographs from around the world for the exhibition commemorating the 150 years of the birth of photography. The exhibition finally opened in Prague exactly the night before the Velvet Revolution in 1989. Now, nothing was easy, but I was young then and not afraid. I also had the experience of being the daughter of a father who was tried for so-called treason in the 50s. So I felt that nothing worse than that could happen to me. But I have to confess that most of my energy came from the readers of Revue Photographie magazine, and later on my books, and also from the visitors to the exhibitions I curated and the viewers of my films. To sum up, here's one touching example. During the so-called Prague Spring, 3 months before the Soviet occupation of Czechoslovakia in August 1968, we received a letter in the editorial office. It said, "When then run you to Siberia, stop at our place, please. It's on the way. We'll feed you. We'll give you a cup of tea." Isn't it amazing? So, another samples of my books. It was the catalogue of 150 years of photography. And a book devoted to 20 years of Czech Press Photo Contest. And before I show you a few samples of the work of contemporary Czech and Slovak women photographers, I have to mention another Czech woman in photography. Her name is Anna Fárová. She belonged to a generation before mine, and it was her who fundamentally influenced my basic approach to photography. She argued that the foundation of photography is documentary and reportage, which have unique characteristics that other forms of expression don't have, except film derived from photography, of course. As a result of her discussions with her friend Henri Cartier-Bresson, Anna created the concept of the condensed photography. It means photography which symbolizes the photographed and also conveys what is behind the frame of the visible image. And what is very important, Anna was founder of the book edition, Art Photography in Odeon Publishing House in Prague, which was the very first edition of photographers' monographs in the world. It was years after the publication of her first monograph in 1958, dedicated to Henri Cartier-Bresson, that other countries also began publishing monographic editions. Of course, by the way, Anna published not only monograph of Bresson, but also a monograph devoted to Bishop, Kertész, Kappa, etc. Anna was also an important curator of the photographic collection at the Museum of Industrial Arts in Prague and curator of key exhibitions of the personalities of Czech avant-garde photography, such as František Drtikol, Josef Sudek, Jaromír Funke, Ressler, Vyškovský, Štýrsky, and others. At the end, Anna was a signatory of Charter 77. It was political protest, and sadly, she had to leave her position of a museum curator and professor at Film Academy in Prague. But she found her way. With the help of her international friends, she continued to work with even greater intensity. So, another books. By Anna. And exhibitions. Okay. And with regards to women in photography, non-photographers, in this context, I have to mention the genial Susan Sontag, the author of the famous essay on photography, woman who inspired Anna and me as well. Why? In comparison with the tradition of aesthetic thinking on photography at the time, she interpreted the media of photography psychologically and almost magically, like an ancient prophetess. She had predicted what is actually happening in photography now. For instance, she said that, I quote, "The greatest result of photographic activity is the fact that it enables us to feel that we can grasp the whole world in our hands. That photography puts man into a special relation to the world because it is perceived as a miniature of reality, or to be more precise, as a fragment of reality. In her opinion, to photograph means to appropriate the photographed. Isn't this precisely the state in which the media of photography is finding itself at now?" And now Czech and Slovak women photographers in post-war period. I divided it into 4 sections. The first one I called Surreal and Poetical Vision of the World. Surrealism and poetism have had a strong tradition in Czech photography since the 20s. Both of these currents are usually joined under the name of magical realism in our tradition. Among its distinctive representatives, mainly in the 50s and 60s, were also 2 very important women, Emila Metková and Eva Fuková. So, Emila Metková, self-portrait. And for Metková, so captions were very important. So the cue. Clown. Sun in the Lily Street in Prague. Closed head. And again, clown. And another, Eva Fuková. And the second section I called Humanistic Tendencies in Documentary and Reportage Photography. The protagonists are followers of the tradition of humanistic photography awakened by the most famous exhibition in the world, Family of Men, by Edward Steichen. I chose 4 photographers. The first one is Dagmar Hochova. Her main contribution are photographs from the world of children, expressing the basic qualities of the most important period of human life, which is childhood. Another humanistic woman photographer, Daniela Mrázková, a sensitive photojournalist who succeeded in creating a strong testimony of the dramatic moments of the Soviet occupation of Czechoslovakia in August 1968. You probably know Joseph Koudelka pictures from that time, but she is also very good. That's Prague National Museum and the main square, Wenceslav Square in Prague, and in the front of Czechoslovak radio. Okay, she also created an equally strong testimony of the events of everyday life, as for example, the village dances she has been documenting for a number of years. And both photographers, Dagmar Hochova and Daniela Mrázková, have been closely connected with the media, mainly with women's magazines. And now Markéta Luskačová is an important representative of the psychological stream of Czech photography. Her strongest work is the pilgrims. She photographed them in Slovakia and Ireland. She looked for the roots of human beliefs. And in England, she documented the lives of the unprivileged social classes. She was looking for the basic expressions of humanity. And the fourth, Liba Tyler, spent her entire photographic life in Great Britain, where she emigrated to at a young age, and from where she traveled to photograph for various humanitarian organizations, mainly in Africa. Her passion and her strongest work is full of deep empathy with the innocence, how she calls her main theme dealing with the issues of women and children living in hard conditions. And the third section is devoted to photography moved beyond the frame of the image and used in various forms of visual communication. I have in mind creatively stylized cycles, time and motion sequences, often using photomontage and special photographic techniques, like solarization, for instance. And these works are used namely in book illustrations, animated films, and also in architecture as monumental decorations in interiors. This huge creative wave was predominantly female, Slovak, and spanned a period of the time from 70s until 90s. The most distinctive representatives are Olga Blejová, Zuzana Mináčová, Margarita Mancová, Judita Čáderová, and Milota Havránková. It's her last exhibition in Prague. And now several examples of the use of their photographs in architecture. And the fourth section is devoted to staged subjective documentary, staged portraits and self-portraits. These are the distinct features of the last decades. They are very personal, very intimate works. Štěpánka Stein. Her boldest work is a visual report of the Prague district of Karlin, which was hard hit by the floods in 2002, through the portraits of its inhabitants. The project won the Mayor of Prague Award at Czech Press Photo Contest. And Dita Pepe, she assumes the appearance of other people, women, men, and whole families with whom she photographs herself. In this way, she makes her so-called self-portraits. One of them is Dita, always. And Barbara Kukliková photographs her intimate feelings about her own person. And Michala Spurna makes portraits of her daughter. To sum up, in the last 10 to 15 years, Czech and Slovak photography has been literally invaded by women. The amount of awards in the annual Czech Press Photo Contest given to photographs taken by women testifies to that. It's real women invasion. For instance, Tao, she portrays anorectic women. Jana Žantovská portrays Czech Jews living in Israel who survived Holocaust. And other, Alžběta Jungrová, photographed drug people in Syria. And Diana Aschenbrennerová, life of homosexuals in Congo. And many, many others. This female invasion is a rising trend. And I must admit that I thought deeply about the possible specification of photography done by women. But I only arrived at the hypothesis that in order to be taken seriously, would need to be supported by a statistical research. If you have it, I'll be very happy to have it. Thank you very much.